Italy has ruled that stealing small amounts of food, if you desperately need it, is not a criminal offense. This is based on a case involving a man by the name of Roman Ostriakov, who stole a small amount of food back in 2011, was convicted of the crime, and then later that conviction was reversed because the highest court in Italy decided, hey, you know what? If someone is in desperate need of sustenance, then it doesn't really make sense to criminalize them. Let me give you the details. The ruling was in the case of the homeless man that I mentioned, who in 2011 was caught stealing a sausage and some cheese from a Genoa supermarket. He had hidden the food worth about $4.50 under his jacket as he paid for breadsticks. He was arrested after a customer informed the store's security of the theft, and in 2013 he was convicted and sentenced to 6 months in jail, which is actually kind of shocking considering the fact that it's Europe, and Europe isn't as punitive as the United States. So to serve 6 months in jail over stealing $4.50 worth of food sounds a little excessive.
Yeah, also, they have meals in jail.
That's a fun
Sounds
side
pretty
effect.
awesome. Sounds pretty great.
I don't know if I'd say that.
I mean,
The thing is, we're gonna end up feeding him for 6 months.
losing all your freedoms and being isolated is just
No. That's definitely bad. But I just financially, when you look at it, to punish him for $4.50 worth of misdeed, you do at least two trials, and then as a result, you punish him to somewhere where you have to pay for his food, which is more than $4.50.
Yeah.
For 6 months.
Look, that does sound counterproductive when you put it in those terms. But let's talk about the issue of poverty in Italy and whether or not it makes sense to give poor people a pass if they steal small amounts of food. I don't know if I agree with the logic behind the ruling. Look, my heart definitely aches for people who are living in poverty. I want everyone to have access to food and water. I want everyone to survive. But I feel like this sets a questionable precedent.
Yeah. It's
right?
saying you can steal
does that mean,
if you're really hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah, now we have to define,
well, then we have to define
really hungry.
what's very hungry, how much is reasonable to steal,
Yeah.
and then we have small business people potentially suffering.
So who's the arbiter of that? That's the part.
know.
Like, who enforces the laws? Who's the arbiter of who is desperate enough to steal and get a pass, but who isn't desperate enough to steal and get a pass? I want to solve the underlying issue of poverty and make sure that everyone is taken care of. You know, maybe there's a systemic issue that we can find a solution to, but coming up with a ruling that just gives certain people a pass for stealing is not a great idea. What do you do if you're a grocery store owner and you have people coming into your grocery store just stealing food because they're desperate and hungry? I want to help those who are desperate and hungry. I'm not sure this is the right way to go about it. By the way, poverty in Italy is a severe issue right now. The number of poor people in the country is growing by an estimated 650 people every day.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Here's how you solve poverty. No, I have no idea.
Well, it's just, we have two different ends of the spectrum, and neither of them makes sense. So where is the middle ground?
You know, I think that sentencing someone to 6 months in jail for stealing salami when they paid for breadsticks is probably a little overkill.
And cheese.
And cheese. I think there's a way, if it's $4.50, I think there's just a middle ground of punishment where it's like, I don't know if you got to work it off or you've got to pay a fine when you get the money, but like...
Yeah, fines never make sense to me when they're aimed at the poor. Because, like, what are they going to pay with, right? I don't know. I feel like maybe community service, like maybe something, like a slap on the wrist. There has to be some sort of punishment. You shouldn't be able to steal, okay? But throwing a poor person in prison or jail because they stole $4.50 worth of salami and cheese doesn't make sense. You're right, Kim. We're dealing with two opposite extremes. One extreme is highly punitive and unnecessary. The other extreme is, hey, if you want to steal, it's okay as long as you're poor. But we don't know what the standard is. Like, who's poor enough? Who isn't poor enough? Like, it doesn't really solve the underlying issue.
Well, someone is suffering on either end. There's nothing that's fair in here at all. And
so, if there's a state of necessity, so how about this? The state creates this peculiar problem that we're talking about by making this, or like whatever it is, the judiciary. I don't know how it works exactly in Italy. But they create this new dynamic where if someone steals out of necessity, then the person who did so isn't going to jail. Now there needs to be some kind of reimbursement by the people responsible for it, which are the courts. Or which is the government. The government maybe is now responsible for paying back all the people who get stolen from by those deemed doing so for necessity. And when it comes down to it, all the people who are paying are the taxpayers who create this slush fund. And now that the government is responsible for paying for those who are deemed to have taken something because of necessity, now the government will be, more specific about how they define it.
You know what's actually a simpler way of putting your policy into effect? Food stamps. Right?
Yeah.
Taking care of the poor and ensuring that everyone has enough to at least survive.
Right. And if you do that, we'd be like, we have done the math, and of course, food stamps are proven every day that it's not enough to actually get you by.
Right.
But theoretically, they're enough to get you by. So if you steal, there's something you are doing which is leading to a point where, like, this is unacceptable.
Yeah.
I guess.
I can already hear conservative heads explode. They're stealing no matter what, even with food stamps. I'm working so all these lazy people can eat. Fuck those kids that are hungry.